Hello and welcome to the First Serves US Open player ratings. It is your host, Jedd here, alongside my co-host, Will Taylor. Will, thank you for joining me, and I'm really looking forward to getting stuck into these player ratings.
Yeah, absolutely, Jedd. Pleasure to be here. And yeah, what a tournament. Unbelievable tournament, both on the men's and women's side. We had so many great storylines, and yeah, so many tales that would tell for a long time. So yeah, looking forward to getting into it.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, there was a lot going on this US Open, probably one of the better US Opens we've seen for a while now, and just in general, one of the better Grand Slams I think we've seen in a few years.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, from usually in the first week you see a lot of storylines, a lot of good matches, and by the second week, you see kind of like the favorites up at the end of the tournament doing their thing. But I mean, there was just so many surprises in this US Open, and yeah, I mean, from both sides of the draw. And we'll speak about the players shortly, but I just think it's putting tennis in a really good spot. I think if you look at both the men's game and the women's game, tennis is in a really good state at the moment.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. Going forward, I think we're starting to see some of these youngsters break through that we've maybe been waiting for a while now. So, yeah, it's going to be really exciting for the next few years. Let's get straight into the player ratings. So, we're going to kick it off with the men. Now, we're not going to go through all 128 players in the main draw. We're going to go through a select few. The big seeds, those who made it deep into the tournament, and also, of course, we'll cover our Aussies. Let's kick it off with the world number one, Novak Djokovic. This was, set up for Novak. You get into the grand final of the US Open, you're one win away from achieving the calendar Grand Slam. He's had a marvelous tournament, overcome so much adversity and gets into the final. How do you summarize that final, and what type of a rating are you looking at giving him?
Yeah, I mean, what a year he had. I mean, it's just, to win 27 straight matches at the Grand Slams, it was simply unbelievable. And going into that final, it really felt like it was his to lose. I mean, he was playing great tennis. Obviously, he got pushed by Zverev in the semi-final, but I think myself, like a lot of other people, probably thought that was going to be his test in the tournament, was that semi-final, and the fact that he got through it. Going into the final, I was guilty of thinking that he would win that game and he would win it. He would win it quite easily, but he didn't. And ultimately, his goal would have been, as we all know, to win the Grand Slam, and he fell short. So, despite his miraculous year, if we're just looking at the tournament alone, he did fall short of his goal. So I've given him an 8.5, recognition of an amazing tournament, but at the same time, as I said, he just didn't achieve that ultimate goal, which was to win the tournament and win the Grand Slam. So yeah, I've given him an 8.5.
Yeah, I've gone with an 8.5 as well. So I think we can agree it's a fair rating. I think that, it's probably sounds a bit stiff giving a player who made the final an 8.5. Usually I'd probably give him a 9, but I just feel as if his route to the final, he dropped a couple of sets he probably wouldn't have liked to have. He only got through one match in straight sets, and that was against Talon Griekspoor in the second round. So, he's dropped sets along the way in every other match, and I just feel as if had he maybe gotten through a couple more matches in straights, he may have had a little bit more left in the tank against Medvedev, possibly even against Zverev, and may have been able to wrap that up in 3 or 4 instead of having to go the distance. So I think that's why it drops off to an 8.5 for me.
Yeah, totally agree. As I said, good start. Both got the same rating.
Yeah. All right, the next one, the champion, Daniil Medvedev. I mean, what a marvelous tournament.
Yeah, I mean, fantastic tournament for Medvedev. I mean, he had a really good run. I think the thing that really got him over the line in the final, from my perspective, is that he spent so much less time on court than what Djokovic did leading up into the final. He was physically and mentally fresh, and that really showed in that final. He played the match of his life. So it's hard to not give Medvedev anything other than full marks for his tournament. So, yeah, I've given him a 10.
I've given him a 10 as well. Can't go past his tournament. He dropped just one set, which was just a remarkable effort, really, to drop a single set and go on to win the slam. It was amazing. And, up against Djokovic, who's playing, really for what he described as one of the biggest matches of his career. So, yeah, it was a fantastic, flawless tournament from Medvedev. We're going to move on to the next one, Stefanos Tsitsipas. This was a weird tournament, don't you think?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. I mean, so much hype around the first round against Andy Murray. I mean, that game was built up to be a huge game, and it was. I mean, obviously Murray kind of got the jump on him, and Stefanos had to really fight back to win that one in a tight 5-set match. He then came back, but he didn't look like the player that we'd seen early in the end. To be honest, he hasn't looked like the player we've seen since the Roland Garros final. Obviously, at Wimbledon, he went out in the first round of Francis Tiafoe, and we haven't seen kind of the Tsitsipas of the first half of the year in the second half of the year. So, yeah, I mean, his match against Alcaraz will go down in folklore, really, of this particular tournament. It was a huge match, and obviously we'll talk about Carlos a bit later, but for Stefanos, ultimately, this tournament was a failure, and he needs to regroup going into not just the rest of the year, also the start of next year and the Australian summer as well. So, given Stefanos a 3, unfortunately, a poor tournament for him, and he never found his best tennis.
That's fair. That's fair. I've actually given him a 5, so it evens out to a 4. The reason I gave him a 5 is just because he's made the third round. I feel as if, I think it's interesting because, yes, he lost to Alcaraz, who he went in heavy favourite against, but Alcaraz actually had a really good tournament, ended up going all the way through to the quarters. So it wasn't as if he beat Tsitsipas and then lost the next match. He managed to back it up. That's why I bumped up his rating a little bit. But ultimately was definitely a fail for the Greek star. So let's move on. Alexander Zverev. Now, this was really interesting as well. I mean, there's so much to talk about with each player. Will, what rating are you going to give Sasha for this tournament?
Yeah, so for Zverev, I've given him a rating of 8. Another one who had a very, very interesting tournament. Through the early rounds, not much attention was given to him. And then finally, as you saw the draw kind of progress, there was the opportunity for him to play Djokovic in the semi-final. Now that match eventually did happen. And obviously there was a lot of hype around that, given the performance that Sasha had at the Olympics in Tokyo, where he did defeat Novak. I've given him an 8. To play Novak and to beat Novak is always going to be tough. We know that. There's only one guy who did it in the tournament. So, he did play a very good semi-final as well. I mean, that was a very high-quality match against Novak. He obviously got the lead, but then I think losing that third set, going down 2-1 against Novak is always going to be difficult. He did well to kind of regain momentum in the fourth, but Novak obviously too good in the end over 5 sets. So I've gone with an 8 for Zverev. I thought he had a solid tournament, but unfortunately for him, I mean, he's in a group now of players who are looking for the next step. I mean, for him, he wants that Grand Slam title. That is the next step in his career. And for him, again, to fall short in a semi-final, I just can't go any higher than 8 for him with that in mind. But, he's looking really good come next year. He's nearly there, Sasha, but just not there yet.
I agree with you. I think he's almost right now not almost, he is in career best form. Still really interesting, though. He's never beaten a top 10 player at a major. So that's one to keep an eye on. But, yep, I agree. I've given him an 8 as well, so that we can agree with there. The next one I want to speak about is Andrei Rublev, the other Russian star alongside Medvedev. Now, he had a really underwhelming tournament. I had massive raps on Rublev coming into it. I thought he might be able to have a mini breakthrough here, but it wasn't to be. What rating are you going to give him?
Yeah, you're right. He did have an underwhelming tournament. I mean, he's had some good results at Masters level this year, but to be honest, his Slam year has been a bit under par. I mean, he made a final in Monte Carlo, but yeah, in his Slam year, he hasn't been too consistent. So I've given him a 5. He came up obviously against Francis Tiafoe, who had a really good tournament himself, and we'll talk about him later. But he'll be disappointed with that. Rublev. Tiafoe's a guy that he would have backed himself to beat. And Tiafoe was up and about for the match, but Rublev really couldn't counteract his energy and his shot making. So I've given Rublev a 5 for his tournament.
I've also given him a 5. I think you're right. You've pretty much summed it up well there. I think that, that match against Tiafoe, yes, Tiafoe's a really good player and has that potential, but I think that was a matchup that Rublev would have expected to win. So, yeah, I do agree with you there. Matteo Beretini, quarterfinalist, went down to Novak. This was really interesting. I thought Matteo had a pretty good tournament. It's always difficult rating a player when they lose to Djokovic, no matter what stage of the tournament. Like, you could argue Holger Rune gets a 7 or an 8, and he lost in the first round. But so Berrettini, I've actually gone with an 8 for him. I think that the fact that he made the quarters, took a set off Djokovic, played pretty well. I've gone with an 8. What have you gone with?
Yeah, I've gone with a 7. Maybe a bit of a harsh 7, but I think just on the fact that obviously he was a Wimbledon finalist, kind of looking at his result on the back of that to be a quarter finalist here. But yeah, again, anyone who has to come up against Novak in a tournament it's going to be tough going. He gave a good account of himself, but again, I mean, I think there's just a question mark over Berrettini when he's playing, the top guys. I mean, he's very, very good against the guys around him in the rankings, but he's yet to kind of have a major success really against Djokovic at slam level. And obviously we haven't seen him against, the likes of Nadal at slam level yet. But I've gone a 7 for him. But he's one to look out for definitely in the Australian summer because he had a solid year, Wimbledon final, and he's still young. He's got big things to come for sure.
Yeah, I feel like he gets hard done by, and I think he thinks he gets hard done by as well. He said in his presser that he thinks he should be seen in that group with Medvedev and Zverev and Rublev and rated perhaps a little bit higher, and I actually agree with him. He's made a final. He's made that Wimbledon final, took a set off Djokovic. Like, he looked good there, could have possibly won it. He's had a really solid year, Berrettini. He lost to Djokovic at the last 2 slams. You can't blame him. So I actually do think he's slightly underrated, and I'm looking forward to seeing him in the Australian summer as well.
For sure.
The next one, the Canadian Felix Auger-Aliassime, breakthrough for the young Canadian through to the semi-finals. This was really exciting to watch, wasn't it?
This was awesome to watch. Yeah, I think there's been a lot of people who have been a big fan of Felix for a long time and have been waiting for this breakthrough. And he was magnificent throughout the whole tournament. He had a couple of tricky matches that he had to get through. And the tennis, I mean, him and his team really needed him to get through. So he had, Alcaraz in the quarterfinal, which was set up to be a blockbuster. He got through that. And then before that, he obviously had Tiafoe in the round of 16. So he got through a couple of matches he really needed to get through. And did it well. So he had a great tournament. He'll learn from the match against Medvedev. He came up against, the guy who ended up being the champion. He'll take a lot from that, but he should take a lot of confidence. And the good thing for Felix now is that he moves up to 11 in the FedEx ATP rankings, which is huge for him. So he's on the brink of the top 10. He's already qualified for Milan, the next gen finals, but he probably won't play that. I think his eyes are probably on Turin and the ATP. The ATP finals in Turin. So, it'll be interesting to see if he can get there. But no, great tournament for him. So, I've given him an 8.5.
Yeah, I actually went and gave him. I was absolutely wrapped with how he went. I gave him a 9.5. I was honestly close to giving him a 10, but then I thought you can't. I think the champion gets a 10. I don't think. I can't really give anyone else a 10. But in saying that, I think this was as close. He couldn't have really played better. He came up against Medvedev in the semis, who was a steam train, played pretty well against Medvedev. I thought the scoreboard didn't do his game justice. I gave him a 9.5. So I think that evens out to about a 9.
Yeah, very fair ranking.
All right. Will, excuse me while I try and pronounce this name. Botic van de Zandschulp. I think I've gone all right there. The Dutch qualifier who made it all the way through to the quarterfinals. That was Aslan Karatsev-esque.
Oh, it was awesome, wasn't it? Such a great story. He played some magnificent tennis throughout the tournament. It was one of the headlines of the US Open was the qualifiers, and on both sides, as we know, not just men's but the women's side as well. And Botic with an incredible run to make the quarterfinals. It's going to be interesting to see kind of his progression from here. Obviously, his ranking has gone up a long way, as it should, for making the quarterfinals of a major. What happens from here with Botic? We're going to have to keep an eye on his story. We've obviously seen that, what the Australian Open's done for Aslan this year. He's had a huge rise in the rankings. Couldn't really replicate the form at the US Open, but he was a qualifier story at the Australian Open that was huge. We'll have to keep an eye on Botic for the rest of the year. But I've given him a 9, considering he was a qualifier to make the quarterfinals. Huge effort. I've
also given him a 9. Come to think of it, I I'd give him a 9.5. Actually, I'll give him a 9. I'll give him a 9.5. I think he was the only one to take a set off Medvedev in the whole tournament. So talk about players who couldn't have done much more. He gets through qualifying, the only player to take a set off the eventual champion. Not even Novak Djokovic could do it. So yeah, I'm actually going to give him a 9.5. We'll still round it out to a 9, but I think he was marvelous, and I think he could actually be a floater in the Australian summer. He's going to like those hard courts at Melbourne Park.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great shout for sure.
The next one, the young Spaniard who is touted to be the next king of, well, not necessarily king of clay, but the next Rafael Nadal, Carlos Alcaraz. Now, he was exciting, Will, wasn't he, to watch?
Awesome to watch. Yeah, we've heard a lot about Carlos in the last 12 to 18 months. And to see what he could deliver, particularly in that match against Tsitsipas, was just super exciting for the future of men's tennis. I mean, that was a huge stage. He's playing, the number 3 ranked player in the world, and he stepped up to the plate at Arthur Ashe Stadium, and the crowd got behind him. It was one of the great moments of the US Open, was just seeing how the crowd got behind Alcaraz, and they really willed him over the line. For him to then back it up in the 4th round, so many times we see, players have a massive victory and then struggle to back it up in the next round. But that was real maturity from him to go and win his next round. And then obviously struggled in the quarterfinals, eventually retiring to Felix. Just wasn't right in the quarterfinals. So magnificent tournament for Alcaraz. I've given him a 9. And I can't wait to see what he does next year. Another one who's already qualified as well for Milan. So hopefully we get to see him in the next gen finals this year.
Yeah, I've given him a 9 as well. Can't go past him. I mean, you've summed it up well. There's not much to add. He was marvelous. And yeah, I think we might be seeing him as quite a high seed at next year's US Open. I think a year on the tour now, and he's going to thrive.
Absolutely.
The American Francis Tiafoe, who caused a big boil over, took down Andrei Rublev. How good was his celebration, Will?
Yeah, there was a bit of debate about this online, wasn't it? Was about the celebration. Some people loved it. Some people thought it was over the top. I personally loved it. I love seeing that kind of passion in tennis. I think it's important to have those type of characters in the sport. And he was awesome. I mean, the crowd really got behind him, and I loved that moment for Francis to win in front of your home crowd. You can tell how much the US Open means to him, and to have a win like that against Rublev, that's a huge win for him. I thought he gave a good account of himself against Felix. Didn't play his best tennis in that match, but Felix had a very, very good tournament. The 4th round for Francis, a solid tournament, and I'm hoping to just continue to see Francis in the second week of majors, because he is a really important, card for men's tennis. He draws fans. He's got a lot of interest around him. So, I've given Tiafoe an 8 for his tournament. Looking forward to seeing much more of him in the years to come.
I've given him an 8 as well. I think he had a really good tournament, and I absolutely love the celebration. We need more personality from our players. They're not brick walls. They're not robots. They're human beings. I love to see it, and I wish more players would do it. So, I've gone with an 8 as well. The next one is another American, a younger American, I should say, Jensen Brooksby. And wow, he set the tournament alight, didn't he, Will?
He did, yeah. And didn't it send a shock through tennis when he took that opening set off Novak Djokovic 6-1? I was on Twitter at the time, and Twitter was absolutely blowing up with this young American and what he was doing for Novak in that first set. And to be honest, in the first 2 sets, he really, really took it to Novak. There was a good set and a half there where, he was playing lights out tennis. Fantastic tournament for Brooksby, and a really good year for him as well. It's great that he could have a good US Open, because he showed some really solid progress throughout this season. So I've given him an 8.5. And again, another one that we'll look out for in the years to come.
Absolutely. An early memory I have of Jensen Brooksby, and I'm just searching it up now to find out which year this was, but he played John Millman in the first round of a US Open one year. I reckon we're looking at probably 20... this one, so I've got it up here. It was 2018, first round of the US Open, and he was a very raw talent back then, 16 or 17 years old. He got the wild card into the main draw, and Millman absolutely demolished him. It was 4-2 and love in the first round. And I remember thinking, I hope that doesn't kill that kid's confidence, because he could hit a ball. He could hit a ball well. And look, it's great to see him back at the US Open and this time getting a couple wins under his belt. I think American tennis is in safe hands with Brooksby. And yes,
Absolutely.
an 8.5. I think that's a fair rating.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally agree.
Now let's move on to the Aussies, Will. This is going to be interesting because it was actually, look, it was a really good tournament for the Aussies on the doubles court. Singles court, they struggled a little bit. We're going to kick it off with our number one on the men's side, Alex de Minaur. What did you give him?
Yeah, I mean, Alex has had a really tough year, hasn't he? I mean, since having COVID, it's been really tough for Alex to find form. So, I mean, had Taylor Fritz in the opening round. It was a matchup that, a lot of people were really keen to watch. It's a great matchup for the first round. That's a tough matchup for the first round to have to come up against, someone playing in their home slam. Fritz played really well. Alex tried his heart out. He tried right until the end in what was a really tight 4-set match. And who knows, if he could have grabbed that fourth set, maybe he could have turned it around in the fifth. But no, unfortunately for Alex, he's losing in the first round and he's really struggling with his tennis at the moment. So this is a harsh rating, but I have given him a 2. And I do hope that, he can lift his tennis come next year, because we know that he can play some really good tennis, Alex, but just physically and mentally, he seems to be struggling at the moment.
Yes, I've given him a 3. I've cut him a little bit of slack. I just feel as if he didn't lose to anyone necessarily bad. Taylor Fritz is a really solid player, and he's sort of consolidated this year. I think he rose quite high in the rankings, and he's had a consolidating year. So, we give him a 2.5 overall. I think for Alex, he'll be really disappointed defending quarterfinal points. So he drops outside the top 20 now of the ATP rankings after, obviously losing those 360 points that he had earned last year. So, overall, I think he's had a really, really disappointing season, if I'm being brutally honest. He's won 2 titles, but we're putting him here up on a pedestal because we know how well he can play. And I'm giving him that sort of rating based on how we know he can play rather than compared to the rest of the field. He's still inside the top 30. He's had a good year, but, I think he had a disappointing year based on his own expectations and the bar that he set in 2020. You look at de Minaur, and I just think he's got to really train the house down, as he always does, but maybe change his game up a little bit heading into the Australian summer. I think with Alex, something that we saw this year was he tried to play a lot more aggressively, but I'm not sure that really suits him. I don't think there's necessarily an issue with him playing his roadrunner style game where he just chases everything down. I think that's how he's going to get his best results. But it's going to be interesting to see how he goes in the off season.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's going to be a huge off season for Alex. And as you say, fingers crossed we can see a better version of himself in 2022.
Absolutely. The next one is John Millman, another Aussie who bowed out in the first round. This was probably a more disappointing loss than de Minaur, considering he came up against a qualifier in Henri Laaksonen from Switzerland. How do you think John went, Will?
Yeah, this was a game on paper that I'm not going to lie. I thought John was going to get the better of Laaksonen. As you say, coming up against a qualifier, I thought this was a real opportunity for him. But no, he couldn't get the W. And like a lot of our men, unfortunately, probably lost games that we thought that they could win, or not necessarily pinch, but they, went in nearly as favourites have. So, disappointing for John. Again, similar to de Minaur, I've given him a ranking of 2, but hoping he can bounce back with a good off season.
I've also given him a 2. I think he needs to get his body right. If I were him, I'd put the body on ice. He's been going all year. I was at his Australian Open match when he lost to Corentin Moutet in the first round, the Frenchman, and I sort of felt there was a major opportunity missed for Millman, and his year was a little bit like that. He got really close at times, but wasn't able to really capitalise. So, back to the drawing board for Johnny, but we always look forward to watching him play. The next one, who is my favourite right now, Alexi Popper, and Mr. Reliable, I like to call him when it comes to the Grand Slams, because he just dishes out wins. He digs deep, and it's crazy. I watch him year round. He is a totally different player at the slams. It's actually crazy.
Absolutely. He just loves it. He gets up and about. for it. And he's had a good record recently at the Slams. I remember in 2019, I watched him play at the US Open. He played a really good match against Beretini and had a good run that year as well. Now in 2021, you know, he's again made the third round, but and played some really good tennis. And in that game against Evans, played some amazing tennis in the first couple of sets. But then unfortunately couldn't hold on. And we got to give credit to Dan Evans. I mean, that was an amazing comeback. That was a great win for Dan Evans. And unfortunately for Alexi, just got pipped at the end. And hopefully that loss doesn't hurt him too much. Hopefully he can take some real, you know, praise from what he was able to do in the tournament, because he did play some really good tennis. So I have given him a 7. But I do think that, you know, there's more to come for Alexi. And as you say, at the Slams, he really does get up and about for it. So, hoping for bigger and better things for him next year.
Yeah, I've also given him a 7. Look, not much more to say. I think he's really, really good at the Slams. Needs to translate that level onto the tour events because, he had a bit of an average patch heading into the US Open. So I was a bit surprised he picked up those wins. But, yes, we will obviously continue to follow Alexi, and I think he's the next Australian star in the making. Speaking of Australians, Jordan Thompson, this was a heartbreaking tournament for Tomo. Second round, 5-set defeat to Aslan Karatsev. He had the match points in the fourth. This was tough, wasn't it, for Tomo?
This was really tough to watch. In fact, this was probably, as an Australian, this was probably the toughest match to watch of the tournament. He played, again, like Popper did in his match, he played such good tennis early. It would have been a huge win for him. We know the year that Karatsev's have. We know the firepower that Karatsev has as well. But yeah, not being able to convert those match points and then going down, a tough one for Tomo. So I've given him a 4, but you know, he did play great tennis in that particular match.
I actually gave Tomo a 6. I'm a bit biased with the Aussies. As you can probably imagine, I've been giving higher ratings than you. But I gave him a 6. I just thought at the end of the day, he lost to Karatsev, you know, top 25 player, had a marvelous season. And the loss in itself, yes, he could have won, but he still played a really good game of tennis, which could have easily been a win. And we got, you know, he had a really good first round win as well, Thompson. So I've given him a 6, which evens out to a 5. And I think I gave him that 6 because I thought it was fair that he averaged a 5.
Fair enough.
James Duckworth, talking about heartbreaking losses. This one was probably even more heartbreaking. First round defeat to the Spaniard Pedro Martinez. Had 5 match points to win in straights. Wasn't able to convert. Martinez comes back and wins in 5 in, you know, what ended up being a relatively routine win in the 4th and 5th sets.
Yeah, again, just not being able to capitalize on opportunities when they come. These are heartbreaking losses, particularly at Slam level. You know, these are the biggest tournaments of the year. Unfortunate for James Duckworth. I thought, as you said, he played some really good tennis early on in that match, but just didn't convert his opportunities. And then the match slipped away from him quite quickly, as you said, in the 4th and 5th set. So I've given him a 4. But yeah, I mean, unlucky for James. He really nearly had that match.
This is going to be really interesting. So I gave him a 2. If I'm being brutally honest, I thought this was, I'd penciled him in for the win. I'd gone, through to the second round, unreal. I thought he got one of the most favourable first round matchups. Probably got, you know, if we're sort of categorising the players in the main draw, he got what the players would probably call a dream first round matchup. Pedro Martinez had never won a match at the US Open. It was a really disappointing tournament for Duck. And I think the fact that he had that 2-sets-to-love lead, had the 5 match points in the third, I think that was actually probably proof that he probably should have won that quite easily in straights. But it's never easy at the Slams, as we know, and back to the drawing board for the Duck. But he's had a really good year and, you know, cemented himself right now inside the top 100, which is great to see.
For sure.
2 more Aussies on the men's side, Will. Let's speed through them. John Peers made the doubles semi-final with his new partner, Filip Polešek from Slovakia. They were scintillating, weren't they?
They were, and they had, a couple of really good wins to make the semi-finals. I mean, we know John is a very established doubles player. He's had an amazing career for Australia And yeah, he had a very good tournament as well to make the semi-finals. Outstanding from John. I've given him an 8. Obviously losing to a very good team in the semis as well in Suarez and Murray. But no, they did have a couple of really big wins there, particularly in the quarters. So yeah, I've given him an 8.
I've given him an 8 as well. I do agree with you there. I think he played a very good tournament. I actually watched most of his matches. I don't usually watch the doubles early on in the slams just because I'm still covering all the singles, but his matches were at good times, and he played a really good tournament. Piers, this was a good stepping stone for them as a pair, and I think heading into 2022, they'll be quite bullish about their possibilities for next season. The next one is Max Purcell. Now, Max got the wild card into the singles draw. I was absolutely stoked to see that. I get really annoyed when people call him a doubles player because he's not. He's so good on the singles court. I think his doubles game has just allowed him to be better on the singles court. You know, it's really cleaned his game up at the net, added another dimension to his serve. So, yeah, Max got the wild card. First round defeat to Jannik Sinner, the rising Italian who's had a marvellous season. And Purcell lost that one in 4, but he took a set off Sinner. And during that match at points, I sort of thought, he could maybe take this to a 5th.
Yeah, I mean, as you just touched on, Jannik Sinner's a tremendous young player. So there's no worry about losing to a guy like that because there's no shame in losing to a guy like that. Max had his moments throughout that match, and to be honest, Max would have come into the US Open with a bit of confidence. We saw what he did in Tokyo, taking out Felix. That was a huge win for him, and I thought he played some really good tennis in this US Open matchup against Sinner as well. So yeah, I've gone probably with a rating of around 5. But yeah, I thought, he had a pretty good tournament, despite losing that match to Sinner. I thought there were some really good signs in that one.
Now, let's just take into account now the doubles because he had a marvellous, keep using the word marvellous, but it is the fact here with Max Purcell, fantastic tournament on the doubles court, semi-finals in the mixed doubles with Diana Yastremska and made the quarters with Matt Ebden. And so they played Ram and Salisbury in the quarters, 3 tiebreakers and grueling tiebreakers. I think they had 2 match points. They ended up losing the third, I believe, 12-10. So this went right down to the wire. This would have been the closest doubles match of the tournament. So they were that close to a semi. So he's had a semi-final in mixed, a quarters in the men's doubles. I've bumped up his rating. I thought he couldn't have done really any more on the doubles court. Pretty much had the perfect doubles tournament and also took a set off Sinner. So probably a bit bullish, but I've actually gone and given Max a 9.
No, he did have a good double. Sorry, I've given my rating purely based off singles there. But yeah, if you put the doubles into equation, I do see that he's had a very good tournament on that front. So yeah, I mean, one that I hope, Australia really gets around come 2022, because I think he's starting to become a little bit more in the spotlight now. People noticed him at the Olympics. That was a really big win for him, as I said, against Felix. So yeah, I really hope that, that the Australian public starts to really see what Max can bring to the court in both singles and doubles, because he's a seriously talented player.
I completely agree. One of my favourites as well on the men's side. Let's go over to the women, Will. We're going to kick it off with the world number 1, Ash Barty. We'll quickly speed through these women because there's some amazing players in this draw. So Ash Barty, I'll let you take it away. It's a really difficult one to dissect, I feel.
It is a difficult one to dissect. I mean, obviously coming off such a high at Wimbledon. I mean, that was such a great moment in Australian sport, that Wimbledon triumph that she had. She then looked really good, winning a lead-up tournament before the US Open Cincinnati. She looked great. But then, in this US Open, she came up against someone that she's had very good history against in Shelby Rogers. She looks like she had this much under total control. I have to admit that at 5-2, I had my social media post ready saying that Ash Barty is through to the round of 16 at the US Open. But it didn't happen. She got broken once. She then got broken again. It went back to 5-all. She did well, I thought, to then make it into a tiebreak to decide the match. But then, Shelby was just too good, and Shelby did play some really good tennis. But to be honest, she's the world number one. She exits in the third round. That's a disappointing tournament if we just take it for what it is. And not look at her year beforehand. If we just solely focus on the result in the tournament, for the world number one to exit in the third round, that is disappointing. So I've given her a 4. She had a couple of good wins beforehand. She nearly won that one. So yeah, I've given her a 4.
I gave her a 5. I'm sort of a little bit more lenient with her. I just thought, she actually played pretty well. Should have won that match. But yeah, I guess, still going that deep into the tournament. I gave her a 5, so we'll even that out to a 4.5. The next one will Naomi Osaka. Speaking of early exits for the big seeds and the former current Grand Slam champions, a former US Open champion in Naomi's case. This was a crazy exit against the 19-year-old Layla Fernandez, who ended up making the final. This no one could have seen that coming.
No, not at all. I mean, it was a huge shock. And this was, to remind our fans out there, this was the same day that Alcaraz also won his match. So it was a huge day in tennis. For Naomi to go out against Layla, yeah, she let's be honest, she didn't play a good match. She wasn't herself. Layla, full credit to her, played an amazing match. But yeah, Naomi just was not at the level that we know she can be at. And obviously now she's taking some time away from tennis, and we wish her well, because I think everyone wants to see Naomi Osaka back playing great tennis, because we know how good she is for tennis and we know how good a player she is. So I've given her a 3 purely based on the fact that this was a huge shock. No one really saw this coming.
Yeah, absolutely. To be honest, I've actually gone and given her a 6. It might seem a little bit high, but I just think so. This was in the third round when she lost to Fernandez. I think she's made the third round. She lost to the eventual finalists. So once again, we speak about those losses, the surprise losses, like we spoke about with Tsitsipas and Alcaraz. The fact that Fernandez went on to beat Kerber, Svitolina, and Sabalenka, I think that sort of evened it out a little bit. It wasn't such a disappointing loss in the end from Osaka's point of view. So I gave her a 6, and I think a 4.5 is probably a fair rating because her tournament was below average. So yeah, I think 4.5 is a fair rating. Speaking of players who lost to Layla Fernandez, the number 2 seed, Arina Sabalenka. Wowee, she had a good tournament, but one of Layla's victims.
Yeah, and she'll be bitterly disappointed, Sabalenka. I mean, she would have thought, seeing the semi-finalists, when you've got the semi-finalists of Raducanu, Fernandez, and Sakkari, she would have backed herself to win the title from there. She looked really good going into the semi-final. She looked like she'd come back in that match as well. But no, she couldn't hold it together in that third set. And when the pressure came and the crowd was against her, she couldn't find a way to get out of that match and reach the final. So a really good tournament up until that point. But yeah, just couldn't find a way through to that final, exits in the semi-finals. And yeah, this would be a really tough one for her to take. So I've given her an 8 based on the fact that she did have a good tournament until then. But yeah, I mean, she'll be bitterly disappointed, as we know.
I agree. I've given her an 8 as well. The 2019 champion, Bianca Andressku, she had a really interesting tournament. Obviously, that blockbuster cracking match against Maria Sakkari, which for mine, that was the women's tournament match of the tournament. That was played of such a high quality. And you're just devastated to see Andressku get injured in that third set. And injuries have really derailed her career after winning that US Open. And they came back again at Flushing Meadows this year. What do you make of her tournament?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it was great to see her back at the US Open. As you mentioned, the 2019 champ, she had such a good campaign, as we all know. Yeah, lots of love in the crowd for Andressku. I feel like there's a lot of appreciation for what she brings to the tennis court. That particular match, as you said, against Sakkari, it was disappointing to see that physically she just wasn't able to keep that high level, because it was a great match. It was a really good match, particularly in the opening 2 sets. It was fantastic to watch. So I've given her a rating of 7, but I'm hoping to see more of Andressku in the future, because she is a seriously good tennis player, and we just need to see her on the court more often.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. So yeah, I agree. We're going with a 7 there. I think that's a fair rating. Alina Svitolina, who ended up making a quarterfinal, can't quite find that breakthrough, can she? she gets these opportunities at the majors and can't quite capitalize. A disappointing tournament, I think, for her. I know she ended up, she was one of Fernandez's victims, but yeah, I think she probably sees this as a bit of a missed opportunity.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a huge missed opportunity for Svitolina. She, like Sabalenka for mine, I just thought she had a really good opportunity once she got to the second week of the tournament to go on and win the title. She goes out in the quarterfinals. And to be honest, that is another loss that I think is gonna hurt her for a little while until we get to the next major. I mean, Svitolina is a player who's been around the mark for a long time now. We know she's won the WTA finals. We know she's one of the top players in the world, but she hasn't been able to crack it at Grand Slam level yet. So we'll see what awaits for her in Australia. But no, I've given her a 7 for her tournament, solid up into the quarterfinals, but couldn't go any further than that.
Yep, I've given her a 7 as well. We'll quickly speed through the next couple. Karolina Plishkeva. Tell us about her tournament, Will.
Yeah, well, Karolina Plishkeva, we saw her make the Wimbledon final against Ash Bardi. She had a great tournament there. She also looked good coming into the quarterfinals here at the US Open, but again, going down to Sakkari in the quarterfinals. Another one who will feel like this is an opportunity missed, so I've given her a 7.
I've given her a 7 as well. I think that's a fair rating considering, it was a disappointing tournament, but at the end of the day, she still made a quarter. So I think a 7's a fair rating. Iga Swiatek, who it's really interesting, she hasn't necessarily done what we thought she might do this year. I remember, when she won that Roland Garros title last year, I think everyone just thought, whoa, this girl can play. She's going to be seriously dangerous next year. It hasn't really turned out that way. She had a good tournament. She's had a good year, but didn't quite reach the heights that she did last year. How did you see her tournament, Will?
Yeah, you're 100% right. She hasn't quite reached the heights from last year. Still very, very young, though, those Swiatek. Yeah. I think, she's got such a bright future ahead of her. And it is easy to forget how young she is just because of how well she's already done so far in her career. Going down in the round of 16 to Bencic, I've given her a 6. Solid tournament. Bencic is a very good player. Bencic, as we know, Olympic gold medalist, has had a very good season herself. So giving Iga a 6 with bigger things to come for her.
I've given her a 6 as well. Gavin Mugarutha, the Spaniard, who similar tournament to Swiatek, it must be said.
Absolutely, yeah. And this game was really interesting against Krejcikova. She wasn't that happy at the end of it, Mugarutha, with what Krejcikova was doing in terms of taking a break, which, as we know, was a big talking point throughout the whole tournament, breaks and intervals within matches. Garbine going down in the round of 16. Another one that will probably think that, she could have gone further. A solid tournament, but again, as for a lot of women that we're speaking about, they all could have potentially had their time. But as we know, there's only one person that ends up winning the Grand Slam title. So I've given Garbine for her round of 16 appearance, I've given her a 6.
Yeah, I've given her a 6 as well. That match against Krejcikova was crazy. I was watching that live and couldn't believe what was unfolding. Pretty stiff from Mugarutha at the net afterwards, considering just how sort of out of whack Krejcikova was. But a 6 is a fair rating. The next one, she returns, Simona Halep, and how good is it to see her back?
Awesome. Yeah, awesome to see Simona back. Thought she played a really solid tournament, to be honest. Like on her return, thought she played some really good tennis. Obviously coming up against Svitolina, very good opponent in the fourth round. Went down in that match, but no, just as you said, really good to see Simona back on the court and with a full off season of training. It'll be good to see her again back in Australia in 2022. So I've given her a 6. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's all good. I've given her a 6 as well. I think we're in agreement with most of these women's ratings, which is good. It means we both are probably right. Emma Raducanu. Well, I'm going to put the rating up already, Will. It was a 10 because it can't get better than this. 10 matches in a row, 20 sets in a row. She didn't drop more than 4 games in a set, apart from once. So out of her 20 sets, just one set that she dropped more than 4 games. It is the most astonishing. This is if we're speaking about sport in general, this is like the Leicester City equivalent in tennis. We remember a couple of years ago in the English Premier League when Leicester out of nowhere won the title. This is probably as close as you can get to that in tennis. A qualifier outside of the top 300 a couple of months ago, just before Wimbledon. She's never won a match on the WTA Tour. This was just remarkable, wasn't it, Will?
Incredible. It was absolutely incredible. I still cannot believe what we've just seen, to be honest. A qualifier winning a Grand Slam is just remarkable. Remarkable, Raducanu. It was just magnificent to see her, and huge for British tennis. I just think, what this will do for British tennis. Obviously, they've had their hopes on Andy for so long now, and Andy, to his credit, is still going out there and still fighting. But to have an 18-year-old win a Grand Slam who was a qualifier, this is just massive for British tennis. She had a great tournament. I mean, running into the final, there was a bit of commentary that, Fernandez had, and probably fairly, Fernandez had beaten, some really higher quality players going into the final. But as you said, Raducanu hadn't lost a set going into that final and was very, very fresh. She played a great final, and she was able to keep her nerve late in that match as well when things could have got really, really tight. So giving her, as you've said, it has to be a 10. It can't be anything else.
Yeah. Absolutely. The next one is Layla Fernandez, the finalist. And I'll let you take it away, Will.
Yeah, well, Layla, fantastic tournament. So good to see. So good to see her run. The players that she beat, remarkable, really. And what was super impressive about Layla as well is not just on the court, her off-court speech, her speech in the presentation that she gave was just so classy for someone of her age to go up and speak like that after her first Grand Slam final. Magnificent from Layla Fernandez. Giving her a 9.5. She had a terrific tournament.
Now, I just want to go through a run. I'm trying to get it up on my phone here because this was, people sort of discount some of the players she beat in the early rounds. Round 1, she came up against Anna Konja, who has been top 20 at a really young age. Injuries have completely derailed her career, but she's back, and back in a big way, actually qualifying for the US Open. So that first round matchup, I tipped Konja. I thought that would be an easy win. That was a massive win for Fernandez first up. Second round, she comes up against Kai Kanepi, who has made quarterfinals at the US Open twice before. So, she's a 2-time quarterfinalist. She's made quarters twice at Wimbledon and twice at French Open as well. So she's made 6 Grand Slam quarterfinals, obviously also been inside the top 15 in the ranks. So those first 2 rounds, difficult matchups. She wins both of them. She then beats Osaka. We don't need to speak about her resume. Round 4 against Kerber, who's won a bunch of slams as well. You look at this quarterfinal Svitolina, semi-final Sabalenka. That is as difficult of a run as you can get. It does not get harder than that.
Unbelievable. Yeah, it was just remarkable what these two finalists did. Fernandez, as you said, the first round Konja, that's a tough match as it is, to then go on and do what she did in the next 6 matches to make the final. Just ridiculous. Insane.
Yes, and a 9.5. You can't. I just don't think you can give a 10 to someone who isn't the champion.
Agreed.
I think a 9.5 is fair.
For sure. No, totally agree.
The other Greek star alongside Stefanos Tsitsipas, Maria Sakkari. Now, she made the semis, would have probably been disappointed she didn't make the final. But give us a quick rundown of how she went, Will.
Yeah, a fantastic tournament, obviously, to make the semi-finals. She'll be disappointed because I think going into that semi-final, she would have thought that she could have made the final and beat Raducanu there. It looks like, after the great win that she had against, Andressku and then Plishkeva, she was really building into something like magnificent at this US Open. Going down in that semi-final to Raducanu, but a great tournament for Sakkari. To make the semi-finals is a massive achievement. So I've given her an 8.5, really looking forward to seeing more of Maria in the future.
I've given her an 8.5 as well. I think that's fair. The next one, Coco Gauff, the young American, the most spoken about player, I think, in her age bracket before Emma Raducanu. Give us a rundown of how she went, Will, and how you sort of perceived her tournament as a whole.
Yeah, this is a tough one, Coco Gauff. I mean, she came up, obviously won her first round match, then came up against Sloane Stephens in the second round. It was a match in which, you know, people going into the match actually had Coco as favourites. I mean, I was listening to the ESPN coverage and they were really talking up Coco's chances. They didn't really think Sloane would win the match, but I mean, the opposite happened. Sloane did get up in that match and got up quite comfortably as well. So it was a disappointing tournament for Coco. I've given her a rating of 5. But we know the talent that she has. We know how young she is. We know that there's just so much expectation on her. But yeah, hopefully now with some time to refresh throughout the back end of this year, she'll come into next year, you know, in a better space, both physically and mentally, to really take on the next season.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, you look at Sloane Stephens, you know, a former champion at the US Open. That's not a bad loss at all.
No.
Sloane's dropped off a little bit in her game, but we know what she's still capable of doing on the day. So yeah, I have to agree. It's a fair rating on Goff. We'll get over to the Aussies now, and this is where we had a little bit of success, particularly on the doubles court. We'll kick it off with Storm Sanders, wild card into the main draw. Well, I'm going to be honest, I was pretty disappointed by her single showing. A favourable first-round matchup against Misaki Doi, who hadn't won a match at the Slams in, I think it was a couple of years. She hadn't won a main draw match at the Slam. So this was a really, opportunistic matchup for Sanders. Wasn't able to capitalise. And, disappointing on the singles court. But a better run on the doubles court.
Yeah, two tails, as you say, the singles court and the doubles court. Disappointing in the singles. A matchup that I thought she would actually get up and win. She didn't. But the doubles, as you say, to make the quarterfinals, a very solid tournament. So I've given her a rating of 5. Just basically that rating basically saying that, you know, she had a good doubles tournament, but really struggled on the singles court.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Sam Stosur, well, it's hard to describe this because she just played the perfect doubles tournament. She was absolutely spectacular, wasn't she?
I'm so happy for Sam Stosur, and I know that there's a lot of people in tennis that are just so stoked for her. 10 years after she lifts the trophy in singles, she comes back and she lifts the doubles title. Tremendous story. 8th Grand Slam title overall. This is a player that is been a seriously good tennis player for Australia. And I heard, Brett and Sam talk on our radio show about, that sometimes she's had some criticism from Australia. And she has throughout her journey. She's had criticism about the way in which she's gone on the tennis courts and particularly her results at the Australian Open. But it was great to see her lift a trophy again. And she deserves to, go out on her own terms. I know there was a bit of talk about retirement, but she deserves to make that decision whenever she wants. And if she's winning doubles titles, play as long as you want, Sam. Incredible stuff. So,
right.
Yeah.
She doesn't necessarily have to stop playing doubles. I mean, if you're still winning majors, you're clearly still good enough. And it's interesting when you think about Sam Stosur because, we'll remember her for being both a singles and a doubles player. But it's crazy. Like, she's won 7 of her 8 slams on the doubles court, but you'd probably argue she was a better singles player.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. Which is, I mean, it maybe because it's a while back now that since we've seen her at the top level in singles that it's hard to think. But I mean, she's been an amazing player for Australia. She's been great at, like a Fed Cup level too. So I've given her, for this tournament, I've given her a rating of 9. Just because, you win the title, magnificent. The only thing that probably drops her away from a 10 is just, the singles performance, because I've kind of calculated for that in this rating as well. But on the doubles court, just completely flawless.
Yep, couldn't have said it better myself. The next one, Astra Sharma. Disappointing first round defeat. In saying that, she did lose to Krejcikova, who was
tough draw. Yeah,
Roland Garros champion. So this is a very tough draw. And you don't necessarily expect Astra to win this match, but I thought she actually put up a decent fight in the second set.
She did, yeah. The first set obviously went quite quickly, and Krejcikova played some really good tennis at the start of the match. She did put up a fight in the second set, but outclassed by a very, very good player. So given Astra a rating of 4, but maybe that is a bit harsh given the player that she did come up against. I mean, I think this kind of progression that Astra's on now, it's going to be great to see what she can do in the next Australian summer, because we have seen glimpses this year, haven't we, of what Astra can do. We've seen some really good results in times from Astra. So, yeah, looking forward to seeing what she can do in 2022.
Yep, I agree. I've given her a 5. I just thought I'll cut her a bit of slack coming up against such a high caliber player in the first round. The next one, and she is the last player we'll be rating, but one of my absolute favourites, Isla Tomlianovich. I've really come to love her game this year, and it all started at the Australian Open. She had that heartbreaking loss at the Australian Open, and since then I've sort of just always thought that could be a little bit of a breakthrough. She might learn a bit from that. It turns out she did. She had a really good year, Wimbledon quarterfinalist. Made a little breakthrough at the US Open as well. She had never passed the second round before, and she took down the 30th seed Petra Martic to reach the third round for the first time. How did you see her tournament, Will?
Yeah, I think she had a solid tournament. As you say, she her Wimbledon run was just fantastic to see her get the recognition at Wimbledon to make the quarterfinals there, and obviously have that match against Ash. Yeah, a solid run here. I mean, to lose to Karolina Pliskova in the round of 32 is, it's no shame in that. She probably struggled in that match. She probably didn't really find her form within that particular encounter, but played some solid tennis before that particular match. So I've given Tomlianovich a 5 for her tournament. But as you say, it's been really good to see kind of the progress in her game throughout this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you've given her a 5. I've actually given her an 8. I mean, I was really happy with her tournament. She lost to Plishkeva. It's a difficult match. I thought she's made the quarterfinal. Plishkeva's made the quarterfinals. It's not an easy match. I don't know. I thought Isla played pretty well. A little breakthrough at the US Open, making the third round for the first time. Actually, I thought it was worthy of an 8, which was probably a little bit biased and over the top. But I'm glad it evened out to a 6.5, because that's probably what she actually deserves.
Sure. Yeah, no, that is probably fair. I do agree with that.
Will, it's been an absolute pleasure. I look forward to doing this again for future tournaments, our player ratings.
Thanks, Jedd. Yeah, great to be with you. And yeah, really enjoyed it.
Good stuff, Will. Tune into the First Serve Monday nights on SEN. You can tune in if you live in Australia on radio, 11:16 a.m. radio in Melbourne, 1629 a.m. in South Australia, 1170 in New South Wales, or if you're anywhere else in the world, sen.com.au and the SEN app worldwide to tune in 8 p.m. Australian Eastern on a Monday night. Thank you, Will.
Thanks, Jedd.